What does it mean to be an artist? This question is pretty loaded and very, very different for everyone. Simply put, I feel being an artist means expressing yourself, doing the thing you love to do, and finding beauty in the fact that the thing you're doing is your own personal passion. It's vague and indifferent for everyone, but that's the whole point. Art is your own journey of self-discovery and self-expression, learning to harness it into something that's tangible and can be shared with others. It's about the excitement, the blissful, brain-tingling feeling you get when you have a spark of creativity, when everything in your mind feels as if it's working correctly, and for a short moment, you truly understand exactly what you are meant to do in this little life of yours. But of course, it's not that flowery. Being an artist is also about struggling. Since it's all about self-expression, that means any judgment, internal or external, is targeting some of the most vulnerable parts of you as a human. Within a world that, in a lot of ways, discourages us from pursuing these artistic passions, a world that puts a value on these things and encourages people to compare themselves to one another, being an artist can feel deliberating. These outside factors can overwhelm the most fragile and vulnerable parts of ourselves. It leads many people to shut out their artistic drives for a more grounded, systematic approach to living life. But is that necessarily wrong? The world needs people like that to keep the cogs moving, and even artists need to find that balance in their lives. Ideally, it's about being realistic to what we need to do and what we want to do. But that's, of course, all about your personal artistic journey. What is that need, and what is that want? And what is the tipping point? When do you know what's worth it for your happiness? And how the hell do you come to terms with all of this? Is that what it means to be an artist? Well, the Studio Ghibli movie Whisper of the Heart is a story about exploring that question. So Ghibli is something I haven't really brought up much on this channel, and that's mainly because I don't have a ton of personal attachment to the studio and its films. I remember watching Spirited Away on Toonami as a kid and being pretty entranced with it, but beyond that, my appreciation for the studio has only blossomed in my adult life. And even with that being said, I'm not exactly a fanatic. I still haven't seen a lot of their back catalog, and out of the ones I have seen, there are quite a few I'm not the biggest fan of. Obviously, the visuals are always unbelievable, but in terms of writing, some just don't do much for me. I think I've come to realize that when it comes to storytelling, I tend to really love and appreciate down-to-earth stories with smaller scopes, and unfortunately, not many Ghibli films fit that bill. A lot of them try to be larger than life, with characters and situations larger than life as well. And this is really cool and really neat for the right person, but me is not that person. A film like Kiki's Delivery Service is much more my speed compared to something like Howl's Moving Castle. And out of all the Ghibli movies I've seen, nothing has felt as down-to-earth, cozy, relatable, and thusly so emotionally impactful as Whisper of the Heart. This one is oddly underrated when it comes to the studio's repertoire. I hardly ever see it referenced in other media, hardly ever see merchandise of it in that chintzy anime section of Barnes & Noble, and don't hear it come up much when discussing Ghibli films, which is just such a shame. This movie isn't just my favorite Ghibli movie, it may as well be my favorite animated... You know what? Scratch that. Favorite film of all time, period. Wowzers. That's quite an accolade, PaperDawN. Care to elaborate on why it's so good? Of course, PaperDawN. Thank you for asking so politely. Mimio Subaseba, or localized to Whisper of the Heart, is a Ghibli film directed by Yoshifumi Kondo and based on a manga by Hiroagi Aoi. It came out in 1995, but wasn't localized and dubbed until like 2006, weirdly enough. So the film revolves around Shizuku, a teenage girl living in West Tokyo who loves to read fiction novels. She has dreams of writing her own story, but is currently only able to use those skills to write Japanese lyrics to John Denver's Country Roads for her choir class. Yes, that's real, I'm not kidding, and I'll get back to it later. Through some fate-driven circumstances involving a cat and library checkout cards, she meets a boy named Seiji who is studying to be a violin maker. As they bond, Shizuku is inspired to take the leap into pursuing her own dream of writing a novel, and there are a lot of little things that happen as it goes, but I'd rather not go into every minor detail here. The joy of this movie is experiencing all those little moments as they happen naturally, seeing the quiet coziness of them and being able to see the beauty in them as a result. So instead, I'm going to kind of break down how each element in this movie worked together to tell one of the most relatable and heartfelt stories I've ever seen written for animation. So if you don't want to hear finer details spoiled, surprise, it's a good movie and definitely worth 2 hours of your life. So go watch it and come back. Okay, are you back? Pretty good, right? Anyways, so let's start with the main girl herself, Shizuku. What an amazingly relatable character for this kind of story. At the start of the film, it's easy to see that she feels as if her life has driven to a halt. She laments on losing the love and passion she's once had for storytelling as the reality of what all that passion has led to starts to sink in. It's led to country roads. Again, I'll get to the song eventually. But yeah, she starts to believe all of this passion is only good for creating silly lyrics for her class. It doesn't help that people around her keep questioning how valuable her love for reading and writing can really be. But two kind of back-to-back life events contest these feelings in really clever ways. She first spots a cat on a train and follows it to an old antique shop. As fate would have it, the antique shop is owned by the same family name as the name she keeps spotting on her library checkout card. And you know, I'm just now realizing something. Would a kid nowadays even know what that is? Do they still use library checkout cards, or is that all digital now? I could see this plot point as something that is very lost on a kid nowadays. If you are a child and you are watching this, please comment if you've used a library checkout card. I'm actually pretty curious. Anyways, these serendipitous circumstances really add some needed color into her life, and what do you know, this sort of fate-driven fairy tale-esque scenario happened in her little concrete-roaded West Tokyo. The other event is that she meets Seiji, and sees how seemingly natural he is at taking his art form so seriously, and how passionate he is about making his artistic skill into a full-blown lifelong career. She immediately has a newfound drive to pursue her passions as well, and with all of the fairy tale-like inspiration she's been experiencing, she begins writing her novel, and this is easily my favorite part of her character's journey. Her excitement for her art is so infectious. You can see the spark in the way she moves and emotes, but due to her intense focus on her art, she neglects other things in her life. Her grades start to slip, she isn't doing her chores, she's just locked up in her room writing for every waking hour she has. And when she's not, all she can think about is writing her novel. Any artist has had this kind of creative boom before, I'm sure. That feeling when everything clicks and your brain is just firing on all cylinders. It's addicting and fulfilling in ways nothing else can be. It happens when script writing for me sometimes. I'll just suddenly go like Super Saiyan artist mode and bust out an entire script in like an hour or two. But other times I lay on the floor of my bedroom and struggle to even think of an idea, let alone get a whole script finished. Yeah, Shizuku goes through the ringer with her novel, clearly displaying all the emotions that go with dedicating yourself to your art. There's a great moment when Shizuku's parents sit down with her to talk about why her grades are slipping. She doesn't really feel ready to admit to her parents it's because of the novel she's writing, but her dad completely understands and encourages her to continue pursuing the passion she's obviously so dedicated to, but warning her that choosing the road less traveled is never easy. This part hits so hard for me. It's ridiculously relatable. When I was 16, I had a very similar conversation with my parents, and my dad basically said the same exact thing. Choosing to pursue art is basically choosing the least secure path in the current world we live in. And if you fail, you'll have no one to blame but yourself. You'll make sacrifices, you'll struggle financially and mentally, and you'll dedicate yourself in a way that may not get you anywhere in the grand scheme of things. But if it's something you care about above all else, it will be worth it. The movie does such an amazing job displaying how emotionally vulnerable creating art is for someone, especially a young artist just starting out. There is a beautiful metaphor they use in this movie about gemstones. A gemstone just looks like a rock from the outside, but if you crack it open and look from a certain angle, it's clear as day there's something beautiful inside, something shiny and reflective and worth more than you could ever imagine. When Shizuku presents the novel to the old man she becomes friends with, she's immediately doubtful it's any good at all, just waiting for him to say it's garbage. But of course, he's extremely impressed. She was able to find it in herself to create the story at all, proving that she had that gemstone she desperately wanted. And even if it's messy and unpolished, it's still a gem. She just had to crack it open and change her perspective. It's such a potent way to describe what it means to be an artist. That self-fulfilling journey and finding that gem inside yourself and going through the process of learning how to polish it. Shizuku's story and her journey as a character is so evocative of the artists who made it. It's a beautiful story that is simply artists speaking from the heart, or whispering from the heart. and as an artist myself, it hits me like a truck every time. There's a groundedness to this kind of story that I just eat up like a full course meal. Every little detail with how realistic everything is, like how grounded Shizuku's family situation is, or how mundane and kind of boring her classmates' romance quarrels are, it all feels so purposeful. It's just this really small, simple slice of this girl's life, and they're able to display such an intense beauty in that, which is just the best. It's so comforting. Like, God, I love media like this. Obviously, the story isn't just about this stuff, it's also a romance. Well, kinda. It is a romance, but the romance is basically completely baked into the artist's journey story as well. Like I mentioned before, Shizuku meets Seiji through some pretty fate-driven circumstances, and once they meet and they sing Country Roads together, I will still get to that, I promise, she's inspired so heavily by his determination and artistic skill that she sets a goal for herself to finish the novel before he gets back from Italy for his violin-making training thing. But little does she know that it was her own passion and love for writing that inspired Seiji in the first place. This whole inspiring each other to do what you love is what makes their romance work so well for me. I'm usually not the biggest fan of romance and stories that, frankly don't need it. I'm not one who just gets sold on a couple because, ooh, kissy kissy, hee hee. But in a story like this, it only elevates its main themes and morals. Seiji pushes Shizuku to be the best version of herself, and Shizuku pushes Seiji to be the best version of himself. It'd be so easy to write some generic romance story where it's like, oh, he chose her over his violin-making career, oh, how romantic, wow. Or even worse, they could have had Shizuku go down this jealousy-fueled route, feeling like she needed to be better than him, quote-unquote. But like, fuck that. That's not romantic. Shizuku completely understanding that he wants and needs to choose his own artistic path over all else, despite it separating them for years, is far more romantic. And her being genuinely inspired rather than her being spitefully inspired was way more honest of a choice. These are two people that feel they love each other on a deeper level than just baseline romance stuff. They genuinely want what's best for each other. It's so stupidly sweet. And as much as I don't care for romance, I can't deny the scene when she gets off the bike and helps him push it up the hill gets me every time. It's such a genuine and heartfelt romance I just don't see in media very often. A very mature romance as well, despite some teenage drama in the midst. Finding artists that can help inspire you to be better is such a hugely important aspect of creating, and even though I don't think this movie needed romance, I do think it's about 1,000 times better with it. And I don't think I can say that for many other pieces of media I've seen, not gonna lie. Also, have I mentioned how this movie is a feast for the senses as well? Obviously, 80s and 90s Ghibli is like on another ethereal level that I will never understand when it comes to animation, but even then, specifically this movie's vibe and aesthetics are so therapeutic to me. It takes place in West Tokyo, like I said, which isn't exactly a glamorous or exciting area of Japan, just a pretty standard suburban/metropolitan area. Not dense enough to be a tourist spot, but not rural enough to be humble. But the movie does this immaculate job at making it feel so homey. All the hand-painted backgrounds of hilly terrain that leave these vast vistas of buildings and mountains, the meticulously drawn nooks and tiny walkway shortcuts between buildings and behind fences, the lived-in interiors of every building, it's all just so tangible. It ends up having such an authentic look and feel, something so simple and quaint, but somehow larger than life at the same time. Obviously, this is coming from someone who doesn't live in Japan, but there was always something so whimsical about this movie's setting, and I don't think it's just like place, Japan. I think it's purposely done by design. Shizuku is a character who longs to live in a world like her fairy tale books, and she laments about her surrounding concrete roads at the beginning of the film. But as she broadens her horizons, takes more risks, and pursues what she loves, her surroundings feel more and more whimsical. She's becoming inspired by her day-to-day life, the life she so quickly deemed as unfulfilling and boring at the start of the film. And it's something as a viewer that you start to appreciate as well. The beauty in the mundane is something I strongly believe in and love so much when it's depicted well in media. I had a pretty fun full circle moment with this movie too. So I saw this movie for the first time in 2019, and seeing the way they portrayed Tokyo was so appealing to me. It really made me long to walk these same streets and explore these kind of outer city areas, similar to these slower, melancholic vibes Meizani Koku gave me. I wanted to exist in this setting. Well, back in February, I was able to take a trip to Japan, and surprise, a big part of my trip's focus was honestly not having a focus, just walking around areas of Tokyo and hitting up random secondhand stores. Me and my girlfriend actually visited the same exact area Whisper of the Heart was inspired by. It even had a Country Roads train jingle. It was really surreal and was basically exactly what I was hoping it would be. It was quiet, peaceful, melancholic, and serenely beautiful. Oh, and a little tiring. There are a lot of hills in this area. If you're taking a trip to Japan, I actually kind of recommend having a day where you have no scheduled plans. Just explore an area and really soak in the mundane day-to-day of a culture so far from your own. It felt nostalgic in a way, which was the exact feeling I was hoping for. Just really good vibes. So, perfect poetry. Rewatching this movie in theaters the other day really helped engulf myself in those feelings again. The movie just does such an amazing job, really tangibly making this vibe work. It's such a huge part of this film that I feel could be so easily overlooked. And of course, with the other senses, the music. Okay, before I get into that, the other background music in this film is really nice. It's folky and soft, fitting that feeling of melancholic whimsy perfectly. But honestly, the lack of music a lot of the time was one of the best choices. The movie can be so quiet and whispery, I guess. Sounds of faraway trains or summer winds are very prevalent. One of those movies where I would be kind of afraid to chew the candy I bought because I really didn't want to ruin the scene's mood in the theater, but it's an aspect I love so much. It may sound corny, but that quietness they depict in the West Tokyo streets really made me feel like I was back there for a second. The sound design really does work in tandem with every other aspect of this film. It's really smart. Okay, fine. Let's talk about it. So yeah, the main theme of this movie is John Denver's Country Roads, like Country Roads, Take Me Home, West Virginia song. And you may be wondering how a song about some guy wanting to be in West Virginia to drink moonshine or something has anything to do with anything we just talked about. Well, it kinda doesn't. The story is mainly about Shizuku writing new lyrics to the melody of Country Roads, rather than the lyrics being translated exactly. And Shizuku's lyrics are much more evocative of the feelings and themes of this movie as a whole. And as overplayed as this, and as fallout associated as this song has become, the song still tends to hit like a ton of bricks when it plays in the movie. It works as a plot device and has a similar folky vibe to the other background music in the film. It's admittedly kinda jarring at first, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't have some sentimentality for this song nowadays because of this movie. The dub for the film is generally pretty good, but when they mention Country Roads, it's sort of implied that Shizuku is writing the song in this universe, like she's John Denver, which is definitely not the case, I think. I mentioned it briefly, but this movie is an adaptation of a manga, Mimio Subaseba. It wasn't localized here, so the Japanese name is the only one it's got. The manga is similar to the film, but it's clear Kondo took some liberties when writing this story. It almost feels like a movie inspired by the manga, rather than an adaptation of the manga. The manga is a lot more shoujo-y, mostly about the romance between Shizuku and Seiji, with both of them filling much more of their generic shoujo roles. It's cute, but not really my thing. It's interesting to see how a few little details of the manga story must have really inspired that emotionally resonant story we got in the film. I think when adapting a manga, this is a pretty cool way to do it. Very Disney-esque in its approach. Oh yeah, also there's a sequel manga by the same mangaka, and it's odd. Like, Shizuku is in a library of cats, and there's this big bird that's supposed to represent death, ? And with just another layer of strange, this sequel manga was the inspiration for the other Ghibli movie, A Cat Returns. I wasn't crazy about A Cat Returns, but it's sort of intrinsically linked to Whisper of the Heart because of this anecdote. Pretty unique way to be associated with each other, not gonna lie. You may have noticed movies aren't really a big talking point on this channel, and that's mainly because I'm not really a movie person. When I watch a good movie, I recognize it as a good movie, but I don't know, no movie has really shaped me like video games, graphic novels, or television media has. I guess I just wouldn't expect a movie to check every personal taste checkbox for me, but Whisper of the Heart feels like a rare exception. It not only feels tailor-made for my personal taste in tone, aesthetics, and even the fact that it's animated, but also has a story that is so reflective of experiences I've been through and experiences that were so meaningful to my upbringing. I do art full-time these days, meaning being entirely productive requires me to be creating in almost all of my free time. A lot of people would tell you that is how you get burnt out. That is how you learn to hate art. You make it your job. You make it your livelihood. But I don't really believe that. There are aspects of creating art I don't always love to do, and like anything, you'll go through ups and downs when it comes to it. Your relationship with any part of your psyche functions like this. But there are these moments where I look at that gem, and while it's still rough and scratchy even to this day, I can see the hard work and dedication I put into polishing it. And if you look at it at just the right light, at just the right angle, it is the most beautiful gem I'll ever see. This movie has been immensely important to my relationship with my own passions, contextualizing feelings and concepts about art that I never knew how to articulate. If you're this far and still aren't convinced, please check out this movie. Obviously, the relationship I have with it won't be universal, but I truly feel it's such a passionate piece of art by artists for artists. And I'm a believer that we are all artists in some capacity. This was a very spur-of-the-moment video, so sorry if it wasn't the deepest dive into this film. There's some really good videos out there that go into the history of this movie, which adds a lot of context on why it is how it is. And if you've got a favorite Ghibli film, or just like film in general, let me know. Also, as a certified not movie gal/guy, if there are any movies that hit a similar vibe, also let me know. I'm sure there are so many pieces of art out there that could have an effect on me like this one did. I just have like zero attention span for things anymore. Anyways, until next time, friends, don't forget about that road that takes you home, Country Roads. It's still kind of strange that this movie plays Country Roads, not gonna lie. Anyway, goodbye.